Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. I'm Canadian in Canada, and I am currently homeless. It's a long story, but a medical issue took away my career, and I should be on disability, but the entire process takes forever. I have seizures caused by a neurological disorder, and it's only getting worse. I have no family and nowhere to go. The system really has failed me. So for the past few months, I have lived in the woods. I don't drink or do any drugs. I think I'm just your average Joe. So yeah, let's get into what happened. Over the winter, I built a shelter. I made it out of a tent, tarps, some salvage materials, but it was damaged, so I had to rebuild. And I did just that. I found a great spot, hidden very well, and made it so I could have it packed up and ready to go in 30 seconds. 5 days ago, I had an appointment with my caseworker for my disability pension. Hopefully, I'll be getting it for August. So, I was away from camp all day. I keep anything of value with me at all times. In my very large backpack, my sleeping bag, my cooking pot, my phone, basically the things that I need that can fit, but I have to leave the shelter where it was. It's just too much to bring with me. The walk from downtown is a long one, so I didn't get back to camp until very late, when it was dark. When I finally made it to the spot I called camp, I was left scratching my head. I was hoping I just got turned around and was lost because my entire camp was gone. It's not uncommon for NIMBYs to trash camps when they find them, but everything was gone without a trace. NIMBYs? Not in my backyard. I texted a few people I know and I got a few replies. One person said they thought they saw what they thought was my tarps and shelter on the far end of the forest near one of the entrances. The worst part of everything is it was cold and raining, but I was lucky. I know a guy who had built a few shelters. There was one he was not using, so I told him what happened, and I went there, and that's where I'm currently staying. After getting some sleep, I went to find my shelter and get back to my warm place to sleep. I found it right where it was, spotted near the entrance of the woods, very visible like it wasn't trying to be hidden. When I got there, I shouted to see if anyone was there, but it was empty, so I thought I was getting it back. I was wrong. So wrong. So wrong. That shelter is dead to me. In the space of one day, my warm, safe shelter turned into something disgusting. It smelled like burning plastic. The walls were covered in human excrement, and there was drug paraphernalia inside and out. So yeah, that shelter is dead to me, but luckily, I have where I am now. And that brings us to today. The warmer weather has arrived, bringing some of the not-so-good people to the area. It's been a cold day, but I had a doctor's appointment I couldn't miss. My doctor has a different round of medication he wants me to try, so that is a must. Don't worry, I am fortunate. I still have my medical plan as well as an old life insurance policy from back before all this, and it's going to be with me for life. The appointment was early, and I got back to camp at 2 p.m. Guess what? I was hit again. The camp was still standing. Don't worry about that. This place is built to last, but someone got in looking for something. They pulled the fabric off the walls. There wasn't anything for them to take besides my supplies. And yeah, that's what was stolen. My food. I had a bag full of canned food, beans, ravioli, lunch meat, all gone. It's a disappointment. That was supposed to be 2 weeks' worth of supplies, and now I have nothing. So I walked to the library where I am now. On the way out, there's a spot meant to have campfires. I use it often, and that's where I found what remained of my supplies. The person or persons who took it must have been really desperate because they smashed the cans open with rocks. The bent and distorted remnants were littered on the ground. So, yeah, I understand. The people who stole my stuff must have been really hungry enough to smash cans of cold beans open. But they took everything. I'm not mad. I'm more disappointed. They didn't even leave me one, and all the wasted food all over the ground. Anyways, thanks for being here for me, letting me rant. Just the true entitlement of people, to take what little a person has and to waste so much of it, really gets to me. The other day I was driving down a certain road in the Bay Area where I live. A good portion of it is a windy, two-way rural road, with one lane in one direction, and the other lane in the opposite direction. There are double yellow lines down the middle of the road which they've reinforced with reflective pavement markers and rumble strips. The grooves in the road which make a noise if your tire passes over them, letting you know you're drifting over the yellow lines. The message is clear. Absolutely no passing other vehicles by crossing the lines. The only time you may do so is if you're specifically directed to do so by a police officer, a flagger, or a sign, important detail for later. Currently, there's a major construction project that will take multiple years to complete. They started about a year ago, and they anticipate it will be finished in 2025. This project has necessitated blocking off one of the lanes with cones, reflective delineators, and signs clearly indicating the lane is closed. There are temporary rumble strips in the lane letting you know that you're entering a construction site, signs with the reduced speed limit of 25 mph. This road is notorious for people wanting to drive fast, and other signs letting you know you're exiting a construction zone. To save the trouble of having to have a flagger on site, they've set up a temporary traffic light with a sign nearby saying that the wait time before it turns green will be 6 minutes. There's a white line indicating where you're supposed to stop. When I get to the light, I often just shift into park because I know it will be a while. Because one of the lanes is blocked off, when you're in that lane and reach the part that's blocked, you may cross over, but only when the light turns green. There's a sign directing you to cross over to the other lane, and another sign directing you to go back once you're past the construction zone. I'm sharing all this detail because I don't see how they could make it any more clear that this is a construction zone other than having cops on site, in addition to construction workers. Anyways, on to the story. I was in the lane which was blocked off. There was one car ahead of me. We get to the light, stop, and wait for it to turn green. Suddenly, this guy in a Mazda SUV comes driving down the road, sees a bunch of cars stopped, and is like, no biggie, I'll just cross over the double yellow lines and pass everybody. So he gets into the lane going in the opposite direction, passes all of us. Then, once he sees that we're all stopped and there's a construction zone with a traffic light, he tries to get back into the right lane. Only he can't get in now because the car in front of me is stopped behind the line. There's literally no room for him to squeeze past us and get back into the right lane without driving into the part of the lane that's blocked off. So he wedges his way in as best as he can, but now he's past the white line that you must stop behind as well as the traffic light, so he isn't able to see when it changes. Obviously, we're all honking our horns as a means of asking what are you doing. He gets out of his SUV. He's a middle-aged white guy, I'm guessing probably in his late 50s, and he starts spewing all this shit about how he's trying to get away from the cartel and that he's going to drive like hell in order to do so. He also mentioned some shit about having to get to the doctor. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was at this point that I went from feeling like the guy was an entitled dumbass to actually being kind of scared. We were all like, dude, you're going to kill someone if you do that. And he responded that he was the one who was going to get killed due to the cartel supposedly being after him. He then asked when he could go, and we told him when the light turns green. Remember, he's not able to see the light because he went past the line where you had to stop. The woman in front of me gets back into her car and moves back a few feet, and I do the same in order to give the guy enough room so he can back in enough to where he can see what color the light is. I was very afraid that he was going to kill someone due to him saying he was going to drive like hell in order to escape whoever supposedly was after him and get to the doctor. Eventually, the light turned green, and we carefully made our way into the opposite lane, past all the construction, and then got back into the right lane. I was still really afraid he was going to do what he said he was going to do, as he was going pretty fast. Luckily, he wound up behind another SUV driver who was going at the speed limit. Thankfully, he stayed in the lane and didn't pass him. In my opinion, people like that shouldn't be on the road. I truly was very afraid he was going to hurt or kill somebody, or himself. So I just got home from the ER after dealing with a horrible incident of being assaulted in Walmart by Karen. Before I go into the backstory, I am in frail health. I have genetic joint deterioration. They think of it like arthritis, only worse and you always in pain. I have had 2 back surgery and walk with a cane. So my brother and I are out getting last-minute supplies for our family Thanksgiving, pumpkin pie, seasonings, snacks, etc. As I'm walking with my cane, my brother's pushing the cart. I don't like motorized carts, and I feel others can use it or need to use it more than me. Unless I have a really bad pain day, I try really hard to move around as much as possible. Cue this entitled boy. That's a nice stick. I look down to my left to see a boy probably 7, 10 years old, eyeing my cane, thank you. That's a cane, not a stick. Can I have it? My cane was handcrafted and made specifically for me by my now deceased best friend. It was made out of cherry wood with Celtic designs all the way down with a special rubber tip. though it's not a toy and I need it to walk. He frowns and leaves. 5 minutes later, I hear, "Excuse me," I turn to my right and see the most horrifying Karen down to the haircut with a scowl that could curdle milk. "Did you just tell my son he couldn't have your cane?" I frown and said that's correct. She interrupts me, "That's just a prop. It's not a real cane. Let my son have it." I clear my throat and say, "Ma'am, this is a specially designed medical cane specifically made for me to help me walk and made by a dear—" She interrupts again. "Don't lie to me. I have seen medical canes. I know that's not one now. Give it to him." My brother steps in. I take the cart and go into a different aisle. My brother met up with me after a few minutes and said she left. About 10 minutes later, I feel something like a fridge hits my back and I go flying into a Holidays display. As I lay there, Karen is trying to go for my cane. I am in incredible amounts of pain and trying so hard not to howl out as my brother pushes her back into the main aisle, forcing her to land promptly on her back. She begins to howl and scream, saying we assaulted her. A lovely employee comes rushing over to check on me as I'm on the verge of fainting, and meanwhile Karen has a crowd around her, and she was telling them how we assaulted her and her kid. I still cannot speak as I'm still trying to get my bearing. My brother, on the other hand, has the most calm attitude I've ever seen of him. That scary calm, though, like he is going to murder someone. He asks the employee to please get the manager and to call police and possibly an ambulance. About 10 minutes later, I was finally coming to my senses and my brother was explaining to the manager and employee what had happened as well as the security guard. However, Karen was making up story after story after story the entire time. Police and paramedics are checking me out, and then her, even though he probably needs mental help more than physical. A police officer and the shop security going back to review the cameras. When they come back, Karen is still raving like a goat on steroids. "Arrest them, arrest those horrible men for what they did to me and my boy." The cop comes to me as I'm on a stretcher. "Do you wish to press charges?" Karen then immediately starts running for the door, leaving her kid behind, only to be tackled in the parking lot by the security guy and police. The employee and manager wanted to pay for my groceries and insisted over and over that they never endorsed this behavior. As far as employees go, they deserve a pat on the back for customer service. As I'm being put in the back of the ambulance, all I can hear is Karen screaming at the top of her lungs in the police cruiser I was assaulted over and over. I'd like to point out that medically I am okay. However, please, for the love of God, if you're reading this, don't ever act like this to anyone. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. Some backstory. I, 31 female, grew up pretty poor. I don't remember it well, but at one point my parents and I were only able to afford to eat beans and rice. My parents have since been able to pull out of poverty, and while they aren't rich, they're comfortable, and I have used a lot of what I experienced as a kid as motivation to be super careful with my money. I got a job in high school, worked odd jobs on the side, saved up every penny, rode my bike everywhere instead of driving and paying for gas. And by the time I moved out of my parents' place, I had a little over $17,000 in my savings. I don't have that much tucked away anymore, but I have investments and emergency funds and take my family's finances incredibly seriously, as I never want my children to experience what I did as a kid. Mine and my husband's financial choices afforded us the opportunity to purchase a home in the beginning of 2015, which we bought 50-50 with his mother. He paid his half up front. I made a large down payment, and his mother covered the rest with an escrow agreement that I would pay off what she had purchased. I have since completely paid my half, and the house is fully owned by myself and my husband. It's a 4-bedroom, 1 and a 1-2 bath, 2-story home with a finished basement, attached 2-car garage on a double lot. We got the house for an absolute steal at only $118,000 for sale by owners. Since purchasing, we have installed a fence, updated the oven, washer and dryer, water heater, furnace, and paid for materials to have all the interior rooms repainted. The only updates it needs are purely cosmetic, as the exterior paint is an ugly brown pink color, which we have started repainting and need to finish. The hardwood floors have some distortion due to it being a 150-year-old house, and us having dogs when we live there, and the bathroom could use an update, but structurally speaking, doesn't need one. Needless to say, on a scale of 1, 5 with 1 being tear down the house and start over, and 5 being it's ready to put on the market to sell for $300,000 today, the house is sitting at a 3.54. Backstory complete, let's get into what has become my biggest headache for the past 4 years. I have a friend, let's call her Carly, female, 27, who had incredibly similar experiences to me growing up, but struggles with finances and has never seemed to get the hang of keeping any sort of savings over $50 at a time. I'm not sure if it's a lack of self-control or that she's simply too focused in the moment when she gets paid and doesn't think to look in the long term, but she consistently makes her lack of funds everyone else's problem. I don't blame her for having issues with money, as learning to create a budget isn't exactly taught in school, and it took me years to learn to find a healthy balance. And the freedom of being able to buy whatever you want with no restrictions is super tempting, but at some point, you have to learn to take responsibility. During the course of our friendship, I have helped her build countless budgets based off of my own. I made roughly the same amount of money as her, but each time they failed for whatever reason. We tried different ways to try to trick her brain into realizing that money sitting in her account wasn't to be touched as everything needed to be used for bills, etc. And each time she would wind up still using every penny. It finally came to the point where I refused to help her with her budget anymore because she never listens to my advice, and when I pointed out the easiest and fastest method to get her spending under control was to get a payee. She said she didn't need to be treated like a child who receives an allowance. Fair enough. I washed my hands of that topic. Carly moved out of her mom's house a little over 6 years ago and into a mutual friend's place. Let's call her Tia, female 27. As far as I have been told by Tia, Carly paid little to nothing in rent, even though they both worked at the same company and made close to the same salary. Carly's living space was an absolute disaster. She moved into the basement, and it was lucky if there was even a walkway to get to the washer and dryer. She constantly asked me to come over to help her clean and organize her space, and because I'm a people pleaser, I would always agree. Each time we would make significant progress, but then by the next weekend, when I would come over to help again, it was as if a tornado had gone through her space in the course of the week. I have no idea how she was able to fit so much stuff into that tiny space. She would never clean up on her own or make any sort of effort to put anything away, and would always wait for me to come over. And if anyone were to come down to watch us, it was always me cleaning or organizing while she sat back and dictated where everything went. Getting her to donate or throw anything away was like pulling teeth, as somehow even the smallest scrap of paper had some sort of sentimental value. After a little over a year of them living together, Tia couldn't handle it anymore and asked Carly to find some other living situation. She wasn't going to throw her onto the street, but she literally couldn't live with Carly any longer. There are a lot of other things that built up that caused this, but I won't go into that here. It just so happened that my husband and I had purchased a second home around the same time. What we had owed on the first was paid off. My husband had come into an inheritance, and we were able to look for our forever home that better fit our wants and needs. The best part for us is that the new house was literally a 5-minute drive from the old house. We had yet to decide whether we wanted to sell or rent our first house when Carly approached us with the offer of renting it from us. She and 2 other friends were looking to move in together, and with the house being as big as it was, there was plenty of space for all of them to have their own room and privacy. Since we hadn't yet decided if we wanted to sell, and there were 3 renters already lined up, we decided to use it as a means of passive income to invest in our future. And then down the road, we would revisit whether or not we wanted to sell it or keep it as a rental. The red flag that I didn't initially pick up on was that Carly was already referring to the house as her house. To her 2 potential roommates, even before moving in or signing a lease, so by the time it came to them all moving in, Carly had driven the other 2 girls to back out. The way I'd written the original lease agreement was that the rent was flexible depending how many tenants there were. So for the 3 of them, they would have only been paying $750 total per month, and if only one person was renting, it would be $400 per month. In this area, you can expect to rent a bedroom for $400, so this was a crazy good deal as we really didn't need the money, and it was mainly to pay for insurance, power heat, and property taxes. In the 4 years that Carly has lived in that house, rent has gone up 4 times. Once to $500 a month because the power bill went up and we needed to adjust for that, the second time to $550 a month due to the same reason, the third time to $750 after she got a new job, and last year in October. More on that later. Also in the 4 years she's lived here, 2 separate opportunities for roommates have backed out. Each time because she was setting the rules and referring to the property as her house, despite having zero claim to it and the fact that each person would have their own lease agreement. When she first moved in, She was working a minimum wage paying job, and she was my friend, hence the low monthly rent. But a year and a half ago got a new job at a local university, 30-minute drive away. That pays very well and has great benefits, but somehow she manages to blow through her entire paycheck on I don't even know what. Also, during the course of these past 4 years, she wound up owing me $750 in back rent, as she repeatedly was unable to pay me the full monthly amount due to repeated miscalculations in her budget, and overspending on garbage, which she then stuffed into mine and my husband's property. My husband and I realized after a couple years of being landlords that we aren't cut out for it. We have too much on our own plates and had no time for upkeep, and Carly wasn't holding up her end of the rental agreement that she had signed. We talked about it and settled on the decision to sell, but we of course didn't want to throw Carly onto the street and informed her of our plan. She proposed to buy it from us and started going through the route of getting a loan. During this process, she realized that the house wasn't what she wanted. She wanted land, and the house itself was far too big for her. She told us that, and we understood, and I even helped drive her to meet with realtors so she could check out other options to buy houses elsewhere. But each one fell through as she discovered that she wasn't going to get a new homeowner's discount or bargain with any loans that she looked at, and all of the loans required a minimum of a 10 down payment, which she of course didn't have. This is where the entitlement starts. Carly wasn't going to be able to buy a home, at least not the home she wanted, and settled on buy our house. We had briefly talked at the very beginning of her tenancy that we may consider a rent-to-own situation, but no agreement had been made. No sale price had been decided, no appraisals or property inspections completed, nothing had been signed. It was simply a comment that we had made in passing and then chatted about later, again in passing. She took it as gospel truth and said that if she bought the house that she expected the 2.5 years of rent, she had paid us to be comped off the total sale of the house. I reminded her that we never signed anything about a rent to own and informed her that wasn't how this was going to work. Her next tactic was to try to suggest that we quit claim deed the property to her, again without her paying us anything additional to the 2.5 years worth of rent she had already paid us. How this works is that whoever owns the property grants the title deed to whoever they're giving it to, and it's generally a lot faster and cheaper than going through the process of buying a house, but there is still generally something paid for the property when the title is transferred. At this point, she'd only paid about $10 in rent, more than half of which went to paying for utilities that we covered instead of having her pay them in property taxes. And she was making it sound as if she wasn't going to give us anything beyond that. I again told her that this would not be a viable option. The house was in great condition, and even with the exterior paint and repairs to the floors and bathroom was worth at least what we had paid for it, $118K. She tried to spin it that she was doing us a favor by taking it off our hands, as I had expressed to her that we were tired of being landlords, and it was more effort than we had time for. Her last attempt at buying the house on her own was to offer me $1. That's right, a single dollar. I will admit, I don't know if this was a failed joke attempt on her part, but it certainly fell flat and I was so mad I was shaking, though I laughed it off. Side note, during the time she has lived in the house, my husband and I have some stuff stored in the garage, as Carly parked on the street due to convenience, and she suggested on multiple occasions that she start charging us rent for storing things in our own house when none of it was in her way whatsoever. And we had already made it clear that if she purchased the house that we would remove all of our property. At the end of 2022, Carly started dating Reggie, 28 male. They were long distance and would take turns visiting each other, and Carly made the comment to Reggie that we were looking to sell the house, and we threw out a couple numbers. The very lowest being $100K, but said that we of course would have to have an appraisal and look at market value, etc. He offered to buy it from us and said that he would start the process in March-April of 2023. I was relieved, my husband was relieved, Carly was relieved, everything was looking great. Some information about Reggie at the time. He is a retired Marine. He gets a monthly check from the government for close to $2,000 on top of his well-paying job. I'm guessing based on what Carly told me, but at the time he made his offer, he was probably making between $4,500, $5,000 a month. When March-April came around, Carly and Reggie informed us that he would not be able to afford paying both his rent where he lived and a monthly mortgage payment, and wouldn't be able to start the purchase process then, but would start the purchase process in October instead when he planned to move in with Carly. Before Reggie moved in, an ex-friend offered to rent a room in the house from Carly and pay her despite subletting being clearly stated in the lease agreement as prohibited. Carly so generously offered to pay us some of the amount that she was paid. The agreement fell through, and the friend did not stay in the room. I'm not exactly sure why he chose to do things the way he did, but Reggie didn't start the purchase process at all until after he had moved and quit his job, meaning the only source of income he had to show to a mortgage company was the monthly stipend from the government, which even with a veteran's loan doesn't work as proof of income. When he moved in, rent increased to $1,000 a month, which is still undervalued for the size of the home. And a brand new rental agreement was written and signed stating that if they had not started the buying process to purchase the house from us by mid-April of 2024, that we would not be renewing the lease, nor would we work with them on month-to-month rental options. As myself and my husband are completely and totally over this mess. We also stated in the rental agreement that we were not going to list the house for sale as a sign of good faith to allow Reggie and Carly first choice on the house to buy it. Here's a rapid-fire list of things that happened since October. Reggie paid the $750 that Carly owed to me in back rent. Carly and Reggie informed us at some point, either late November or early December, that they would not be buying the house as the repairs required amounted to more than $50K. I don't know where they got this number, as I have budgeted on multiple occasions to redo the flooring, and it would be less than $15K to redo the entire house, nor would repainting cost more than a few thousand, or the bathroom remodel, as they intended to do the work themselves. We repaired the major damage in the bathroom recently for less than $500. They could not acquire rental housing due to having 3 cats and will indeed be staying in the house. We informed them we're not renewing the lease and reiterated our reasoning. I made the mistake of telling Carly what we owed on our mortgage, and they turned around and offered us $50K to buy the house from us. Less than 1/3 the market value of the house if we sold it as is. We politely declined and then promptly went home and screamed into pillows. They have repeatedly told Tia that they are desperate for money to the point of debating setting up a GoFund. Me. All the while, Carly has gotten 2 brand new tattoos in the past year and has an international trip she has paid for in full that she is going on at the end of March, and Reggie has still not acquired even a part-time job. We emergency installed a water heater that Reggie paid for that I will have fully paid back by the end of March. Carly quit her job, and now the only income they will have after the end of this week is Reggie's military stipend. Carly nonchalantly stated that we would have to renegotiate rent for this month and next month. There will be no negotiation. She made a bad decision and will have to live with the consequences of her actions. The most recent thing she did was text me 2 days ago asking if she could pay me in food for this month's rent. Knowing her, the amount she will pay will amount to only a couple meals and maybe $75 in groceries, instead of the roughly $500 that they will owe. I owe Reggie roughly $500 left to pay off the last bit of the water heater. I jokingly answered that the electricity and insurance companies don't accept food as payment, so neither can I. She then offered to pay me what it would cost to pay these expenses, and then the rest she would pay in food. I have not responded. It's been a day and a half. They will pay me in cash and nothing else. I'm done. No discussion. My warning to all of you, don't mix business and friends without getting to know said friends very well first. If I had known what I would be walking into, I never would have allowed her to move it. Update 1. Good. Oh my God. I should clarify. The reason we let Carly move in the first place is because she made it sound like she literally had nowhere to go. She'd spun a tale that her home life with her mom was not safe. Untrue. She made it sound like Tia was literally kicking her out that day. Also untrue. And she panically hounded me relentlessly in person and over the phone until my husband and I made a super quick decision to let her rent from us. I've learned this is a method of manipulation. I've reached out to an attorney. We talked about everything that's happened. They read through the lease and gave us a few options. We wait until May 1st when Carly and Reggie are supposed to be out of the house. If they're not out, deliver an intent to sell notice. That gives them 90 days to vacate the property after the lease is up. Not ideal. We deliver the intent to sell now. That means they have until mid-June to get the F out. Still not ideal, but better. If they're still in the house past the 90 days, we file unlawful detainer and the cops forcibly kick them out. We can't evict because we don't have the grounds. Even with all of this, the courts just about everywhere are against landlords and in favor of tenants. The minute their rent is late, we then have grounds for eviction. That gives them 14 days to pay or get the F out. But if they pay, the eviction process ends. So still not ideal. They can't get squatters' rights because they haven't been here long enough. I'm going to be telling her mother everything she's done, because I'm pretty sure she has no idea. I'm also telling all our mutual friends. I've done a lot of self-reflection lately before writing this post and came to several conclusions. I know she's not my friend. I had a false idea that I was helping someone that I saw as a friend, and in the end I enabled her crappy behavior. I'm aware I'm a doormat. I know I don't know how to set boundaries. I spent a lot of time on the phone and in professional offices over the last few days. I'm on a waiting list to see a therapist and learn to set boundaries, because I don't ever want to teach my kids my bad behaviors and habits that got me into this mess. And for all of you who mentioned that it is a miracle my husband is still with me, he was with me along the whole process. I never did anything without his consent since we owned the house 50-50. I'm taking most of the blame because Carly was my friend. I've apologized to him and we had a deep conversation about working on communication. He apologized for not seeing sooner that my friend wasn't who she claimed to be and didn't warn me I was being manipulated. I'll update again when we get closer to May 1st unless something happens sooner. Several years ago, I heard my sweet neighbor and another woman arguing on the sidewalk. I looked closer and noticed they were both pulling a plant pot in different directions and about to fight. No clue what was up, but knew my neighbor. If she was arguing, she was right. Me and my husband went over to intervene. My husband wanted to help make peace. Me? I was going to help my neighbor, no questions asked. Why the argument? The other woman was a new neighbor. Our nice neighbor noticed her plant pots were missing and were in the new neighbor's yard. Yep, new neighbor had stolen nice neighbor's plants, plant pots, and yard decor and decorated her yard with it. My nice neighbor had hand-painted several pots that were in her yard. Thus, they were easy to identify as hers. We all walked over to the new neighbor's yard to get our other neighbor's stuff back. When we got to the new neighbor's yard, we noticed several things looked both weird and very familiar. Oh yeah, and the new neighbor had called the cops on us, or at least someone did. Anyway, the new neighbor had planted patches of different types of grass all over the yard in a checkerboard pattern. As well, mismatched shrubs and flowers. I looked at our house a little closer. Yep, we were missing grass patches from the side of the house and one of our shrubs. When the police arrived, the new neighbor was adamant the plants, pots, grass, shrubs, and yard decor were hers. She informed the cops she dug them up from other yards in the middle of the night and planted them. Yep, she claimed finders keepers. Didn't quite work out. My nice neighbor insisted on pressing charges for petite theft and destruction of property. We just dug up our grass patches and replanted them. Some of them even survived it. Nosy neighbors kept walking by after the new neighbor was arrested. As we were digging things up, we explained why to them. Neighbors kept recognizing their stuff from her yard. One neighbor asked if we'd seen a picnic table as his was missing. We hadn't thought to check the backyard. Yep, picnic table and a yard full of her finders keepers haul. She moved pretty much right afterward. We didn't miss her. All employees are wearing fancy black clothing, while I am literally wearing a bright green bomber jacket, wild hair, day, socks with Birkenstock sandals. My dad and I are waiting in line to be seated at Dan Modern, while she impatiently waits for her online order behind us. I don't resemble my white dad very much, and he isn't super talkative. He doesn't seem to realize we were there together when trying to get my attention. Her. Excuse me. Me. Sorry what? She goes on to angrily witch rant about her order, how long she's been waiting, and is clearly trying to take her anger out on me. I'm super confused and finally cut her off when I realize why she's telling me all this, quickly saying, I don't work here, but sorry to hear. Oh. She immediately goes back on her phone and coldly refuses to make further eye contact until we got seated. IDK, she must have been about my age, mid-20s, and embarrassed. She should be. I was clearly a customer. IDK, why anyone would make this assumption outside of racial appearances, but key. Wish I could show pics of my attire V's, the server's pulled back hair, name tags, uniform. I would have loved a legit apology because at the time it felt like she was still angry at me for existing there. Or maybe I should have embarrassed her further, but my automatic response to others' anger is to people, please, especially when it's directed at me. Oh well, hope she learned to chill the F out. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.